I knew something was off the second I saw the balloons. Half inflated, sagging like they'd given up halfway through the party setup and thought, screw it, she won't care. One said congrats, in gold letters peeling off like the printer ran out of toner mid-celebration. Another had a typo, happy promotion, which felt more like an omen than a mistake. But I smiled, walked in, nodded to Brenda from Ops. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I should have turned around right then. The CEO stood at the head of the boardroom table like he was presenting a new product line, not a woman who'd worked 80-hour weeks and hit every quarterly target for 3 years straight. For all your hard work, he said, raising a glass of flat champagne, we wanted to honor you personally today. And then he handed me a folder. I opened it. No bonus check. No title bump. No performance review. A demotion notice. Printed. Stapled. Double-spaced like that made it less insulting. Effective immediately, you'll be reassigned to a supporting role under our new VP of Strategic Growth. A guy I trained 6 months ago who still couldn't schedule his own Zoom calls without emailing IT. And just to ice the cake, my manager, slick-haired Ron with his dollar store cologne, was recording the whole thing on his phone. Smile for the committee. He cackled like it was a wedding toast. They're gonna love your reaction. I didn't give them what they wanted. No tears, no yelling, no grabbing the fake balloons and storming out like a YouTube tantrum. Instead, I reached into my purse, pulled out my own folder, handed it to the CEO. Effective immediately, I said, keeping my voice light, I resign. You could hear a binder drop. And before I continue, hey, if you're still here listening, take 2 seconds and hit the like button, maybe subscribe. It helps us keep telling these stories. And honestly, it keeps the team caffeinated enough to relive corporate trauma on your behalf. All right, back to the disaster. I walked out before they could blink, heels clicking on that polished laminate like a gavel. Ron's phone was still up, recording. He thought this was going to be gold for the HR Slack. Little did he know, I wasn't leaving in defeat. I was exiting a building I'd already set on fire, because what no one in that glitterless boardroom knew was that I hadn't come in empty-handed. That resignation letter? Not drafted in the parking lot. I'd printed it a week earlier, after signing a consulting agreement with one of their biggest clients, quietly, off-record, no LinkedIn announcement, no LinkedIn tears. 2 weeks ago, I had coffee with Meredith Singh, EVP over at Traverly Logistics. I'd saved her team's deliverables back in Q1 when our project managers were too busy trying to automate empathy via chatbots. Meredith had leaned over her latte and asked, have you ever thought about going independent? I had, for years, but that day I said yes. That afternoon we signed NDAs and a transition contract, and then I spent the next 10 days gathering, backing up billing folders, archiving compliance logs, downloading PDF versions of outdated SOPs they were still using to overcharge clients. Oh, and let's not forget the cherry on top, a Slack thread between Ron and the new VP, where they joked about padding Q4 by reselling the same service package under 3 different invoice codes. Ron ended it with, just keep Susan out of it, she'd actually report us. He wasn't wrong. But I didn't go to the ethics board, didn't scream into a performance review or CC legal like some desperate martyr. I let them have their little show. Let them record me walking out like a good girl who got put in her place. Because the real show hadn't started yet. And they were about to find out that the only thing more dangerous than a woman passed over for promotion is one who's already packed her bags, printed the receipts, and sent a confidential email to your biggest client's audit team. Tick, tick, by the time I reached the elevator, the vultures were already circling. Not the higher-ups, they were still in the boardroom pretending they hadn't just tripped over their own egos. No, it was the mid-level crowd, the Slack lurkers, the breakroom prophets who always had a feeling something was off after it's already too late. Brenda from Ops pretended to bump into me in the lobby. Oh my gosh, Susan, are you okay? I just heard. You were supposed to be promoted today, right? She said it like a question, but her tone had that juicy-flavored curiosity of someone already halfway through retelling it in a group chat. I smiled. The same smile I gave my dentist when he suggested adult braces. Tight, polite, weaponized. Thanks for everything, Brenda. I'm just moving on to other things. Her eyes went wide. So it's true? You quit? I resigned, I corrected softly, like I was telling a child not to pet a feral cat. And with that, I walked out the front doors of a building I had practically bled into for 5 years. No cardboard box full of desk plants and novelty mugs. Just my phone, my keys, and a purse full of very organized digital payback. But oh, the rumors. By the time I hit the coffee shop down the block, 2 former interns had already DM'd me on LinkedIn. One asked, are you okay? The other sent a shrug emoji and said, heard they F'd up bad. You were next in line, right? Even folks from the compliance team, people I hadn't spoken to since the Data Integrity Week debacle, were texting me, some pretending to be surprised, others trying to get ahead of whatever they suspected I might do next. I ignored them all. Let the mystery ferment. Instead, I crafted a simple farewell email. Short, sweet, full of corporate seasoning and zero nutrition. Subject: thank you, hi team. As of today, I'll be stepping away from my role at Farson & Co. I'm grateful for the many opportunities, the growth, and most of all, the incredible people I've worked alongside. Wishing you all continued success, Susan. No hints, no shade, no passive-aggressive gifts. Just the kind of email that HR could read out loud at a holiday party without choking on liability. That didn't stop people from tearing it apart like conspiracy theorists analyzing crop circles. Did you see how she didn't mention Ron? She didn't even list her next company. I think she's pregnant. No, Jennifer. What I am is extremely done pretending to applaud mediocrity just because it wears a name badge with VP on it. But amid the chaos and speculation, one person stood out. Ray. Legal team, second floor, corner office. Dry as unbuttered toast. Known for correcting grammar in contract clauses and ruining holiday parties by quoting case law. But Ray was also the only person in that company who'd ever asked me, months ago during a procurement audit, "You ever think about leaving?" At the time, I just laughed and said, "Who else is going to catch your red lines when you forget to close a parenthesis?" But as I passed him that afternoon, he didn't say anything. Just looked up from his laptop, met my eyes, gave the smallest of nods. Not pity, not panic, recognition, like he knew something was moving, like he understood that silence can be the loudest damn warning shot in the world. See, Ray had survived 3 CEOs, 2 restructures, and 1 class action suit. He knew when someone left quietly, it wasn't because they were broken. It was because they were already busy. He didn't try to stop me. Didn't send a let's talk calendar invite. Because Ray from legal knew one thing better than anyone else in that building. When the quiet ones leave smiling, they're coming back with paperwork. And I had a whole briefcase full. 2 weeks before the boardroom blindsiding, I sat across from Meredith Singh in a quiet corner booth at Paloma's Bistro, the kind of place where the clink of wine glasses disguises every corporate betrayal ever whispered over a linen tablecloth. Meredith wasn't just a client. She was the client. Senior EVP at Travelly Logistics, one of our firm's largest whales. I'd saved her bacon 2 years ago when our delivery timeline got butchered by Ron's brilliant idea to outsource QA to someone's nephew with a Google Sheets fetish. She knew what I was worth because I made her look like a hero to her board. And now, her eyes studied me over a half-drunk iced espresso as she asked, with carefully measured neutrality, "Susan, would you ever consider stepping into a consulting role? Independent, just you?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I was unsure, but because when you've been chewing glass in silence for 3 years, you don't want to spit out your victory too soon. I set down my water glass. Off the record, she nodded once. I'd consider it, with the right terms. An hour later, we weren't just considering. We were negotiating. We laid out a soft landing clause, transition agreement, and yes, an NDA so thick you could club a CFO with it. She even made sure her assistant delivered the paperwork via personal courier, not email. No digital trail. Meredith knew how the game was played, and she wanted me on her team before my old one figured out they were bleeding talent out the side. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from stress, but from the adrenaline of clarity. My life had been a fog of staff meetings, quick pivots, and Ron using the phrase synergistic touchpoint like it was foreplay. But suddenly, everything sharpened. I wasn't just planning my exit. I was planning their unraveling. I started with the innocuous stuff, pulled down project folders from our shared drive, the ones with timestamps that never lined up with billing, downloaded archived PDFs of policies that had been updated but not actually enforced. I flagged internal time logs where junior staff were clocking 80 hours a week on accounts that were officially closed. That's not just burnout, that's bill padding. Then I went deeper. Remember the billing anomalies Ron bragged about in the Slack thread? I cross-referenced them against client invoices. Lo and behold, services were being repackaged and billed under false line items. I knew what it was the moment I saw it. Client fraud with plausible deniability. The kind of scheme that implodes careers the second a forensic accountant sees daylight. And I didn't just save it to my desktop like some rookie whistleblower. I organized it all in an encrypted drive, tagged by client, date, and violation. Labeled neutrally, Q3 review, team audit notes, workflow optimization suggestions. Boring enough to be invisible. Precise enough to light a match under legal's ass if it ever landed in the wrong inbox, which eventually it would, and while I was at it, I cleaned up my own footprint. Deleted old comments. Removed version history on documents I once edited but didn't own. Made myself digitally invisible in all the places that matter when the heat turns up. You don't just leave a company like Farson and Co. You bleed out of it data point by data point until there's nothing left to trace. But I wasn't planning to disappear. I was planning to reappear, somewhere they couldn't touch me, somewhere above them. So I smiled at every meeting, laughed at Ron's dead-eyed jokes, gave feedback on slide decks like I wasn't already packing my intellectual suitcase. Because when you've spent years building a kingdom in someone else's castle, you eventually realize the moat was never for your protection. It was to keep you from realizing the door's been unlocked the whole time. And I was already halfway through it, blueprint in one hand and a sledgehammer in the other. From the outside, it looked like I was decompressing. That's what the LinkedIn vultures assumed anyway, commenting under my vague next chapter post with things like "take the time to rest, you earned it," and "onward and upward." while secretly forwarding my profile to their team leads with a subject line like Susan's loose. Should we DM? No one saw the spreadsheet open on my screen at 2:13 a.m., or the wall behind my desk lined with sticky notes color-coded by violation severity, or the pot of stale coffee I'd reheated 3 times, untouched. There were no jogs through the park or inspirational podcasts in my earbuds, just the rhythmic click of my trackpad and the slow construction of a digital guillotine. I wasn't recovering. I was documenting. Let's talk about the math. In Q1 alone, I found 147 hours billed to the Travelly account by 2 junior analysts who'd already been reassigned to other projects. I cross-referenced calendar events, internal time cards, and Outlook logs. They were working on the Stratcom deal when those hours were logged. One of them had even been on PTO in the Virgin Islands. Cute Instagram posts, too. I screenshotted them. Then came the compliance trails, or lack thereof. Mandatory product testing certifications had expired. Rather than pausing deliverables, Ron and his crew simply removed the QA checkbox from the status sheet and called it streamlining. And the forged metrics? Chef's kiss. Apparently, our new VP of Strategic Growth didn't just copy-paste my old forecasting slide deck. He inflated our implementation success rate from 83% to 96% by removing every project older than 6 months from the data pool. That's not analytics, that's creative nonfiction. He even left the original slide notes intact, do not alter. Susan to finalize post-client review. I printed it, in color, but the smoking gun, that was buried in version history, just like Ron bragged it would be. Months ago, over limp sandwiches in the break room, he'd half-whispered to a junior dev, if you tweak it in V12.4 and save it before uploading, legal can't trace back the original inputs. Versioning's your friend. He was talking about product cost modeling for a federal subcontractor. I remembered the joke because he ended it with, no one audits procurement data unless you give them a reason. Well, Ron, I was that reason now. Took me 10 minutes to pull the original file from cloud storage. V12.4 had been swapped into a folder named Final Client Deliverables, while the V12.3 sheet, the one with the real numbers and actual labor cost calculations, was quietly archived in a folder helpfully labeled Sandbox Trash. Inside were margin discrepancies wide enough to drive a subpoena through. So I didn't go to the press. I didn't tweet vague threats or start an anonymous Medium blog post titled Corporate Rot from the Inside. Instead, I sent a single message to Travelly Logistics' internal audit team. Subject: Compliance concerns former Farson & Co., contractor body. Hi. As a former project lead on the Travelly account, I'm aware of recent data discrepancies and have assembled documentation for your internal review. I'd prefer to handle this professionally, directly, and in good faith. Please confirm your secure upload protocol and I'll begin transferring files for your investigation. No flourish, no drama, just numbers, dates, and a resume that made sure they'd listen. The reply came 7 hours later. Thank you, Susan. We'll be in touch shortly. Secure drive link below. I stared at the message for a few long seconds, not because I was nervous, because I wasn't. I had everything. Let the rumors swirl. Let them think I was sipping herbal tea in a robe, reading self-help books and rediscovering balance. The only thing I was rediscovering was leverage. And it was beautifully, clinically, legally organized. The first sign something was wrong came in the form of silence. Not dramatic silence, just missing noise, a wire transfer that should have landed Monday didn't. No angry emails, no last-minute calendar invites, just one line in the payment system dashboard, pending under internal review. At Farson & Co., pending is a 4-letter word. It means a client's gotten wise or nervous or both. It means someone somewhere is asking questions with audit in the subject line. So when the usual $1.2 million installment from Travelly Logistics didn't hit the account, the CFO flagged it immediately. The controller flagged it again. And by Friday, the CEO was pacing the glass box they call the executive war room, dragging his overpriced dress shoes across the rug like the friction could generate answers. Why is this account quiet? He asked, voice low and taut. I want status reports. I want email logs. I want eyes on every line of communication since the 15th. He didn't look at Ron when he said it, but he didn't have to. Ron, predictably, tried to spin. They're probably reorganizing their procurement process again. You know how Meredith is, very hands-on. Probably just some bureaucratic. Ray from legal, sipping his 4th black coffee of the morning, interrupted without even glancing up from his laptop. Susan worked that project. The room went still. Ray blinked slowly. You did just film her resignation, didn't you? Laughed about it in Slack. A few heads turned. One middle manager suddenly found her pen fascinating. Another coughed into his sleeve like it might shield him from the scent of pending litigation. Ron rolled his eyes. Oh, come on, that video was harmless. She quit, dramatically. Probably doing yoga in Sedona now or something. Ray looked up, just looked. And that, more than anything he could have said, landed like a file folder to the face. Because if Ray from legal was looking at you, It meant he already knew something he wasn't ready to say out loud yet. He was giving you one last chance to shut your mouth before your email history became public property. But Ron couldn't help himself. She was replaceable, he barked, gesturing wide like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Susan did solid work, sure, but she didn't own the clients. We do. That's how this business works. Funny how confident a man sounds before the floor gives out. Because downstairs in account management, someone had just noticed that Traverly wasn't the only client slowing down. 3 other accounts Susan had touched, directly or tangentially, were also delayed for internal review, which meant either they were all having the same spontaneous procurement existential crisis, or something bigger was unfolding. The second hypothesis didn't get verbalized, not yet, but you could feel it. In the way people stopped talking when you walked by, in the sudden tightening of email language, in the way the VP of strategy deleted half a slide deck 2 minutes before sending it to legal. Something had been triggered, and no one could see it, not clearly, just the shape of it, the shadow of it, like headlights cresting a hill in the fog, still too far to define, but close enough to know impact was coming. Ray closed his laptop. I'll start a quiet review of client data integrity logs, he said flatly. No need to escalate, the CEO replied too quickly. Of course not, Ray said, already walking out. Just good hygiene. Behind him, Ron laughed nervously. Guys, seriously, it's Susan. What's she gonna do? Upload a strongly worded memo to Dropbox? He didn't realize the memo was already delivered, and it came with attachments. The inquiry didn't arrive with sirens. It came as a polite email from a third-party audit firm, neutral tone, logo crisp. Subject line gentle. Request for documentation routine account review. But anyone with half a brain and a sliver of conscience felt their stomach drop just reading it. The request was precise, surgical. Please provide all-time logs, subcontractor contracts, QA documentation, and billing correspondence for Traverly Logistics between January 1st and August 31st. Cross-check with internal compliance records and third-party invoicing systems. No accusations, no drama, just enough specificity to let everyone at Farson & Co. know they were no longer in control of the narrative. It was no longer internal. The head of compliance, a man so boring his voice once put a paralegal to sleep mid-Zoom, suddenly couldn't stop pacing. His assistant Harper, 22, organized, dangerously observant, was tasked with compiling the files. She started with QA reports and subcontractor receipts. Everything looked routine at first, until she noticed the metadata. A surprising number of these files, some stretching back to Q1, had been last touched by Susan. Not just edited, touched. As in, opened, reviewed, saved again. Harper blinked at the timestamps. One receipt for a contractor who supposedly worked 10 weeks on site in Arizona had last been opened by Susan 2 days before she resigned. Weird, right? Why would she be in that file? Why would she be poking around in closed documentation? She didn't say anything right away. She wasn't stupid, but she printed a list of file names and slid it into her own notebook. Just in case. Upstairs in the executive war room, the mood had shifted from tense to glacial. The CEO skimmed the audit request. His hands were visibly shaking, which he tried to disguise by tapping his pen like a metronome. Where's the time log data? He snapped at no one in particular. Still compiling, someone mumbled. What about QA reports? Archived. Some were flagged last quarter, he cut them off. And subcontractors? We did confirm all those contracts are valid, right? No one answered. That's when he started making calls. Meredith didn't pick up. Neither did the Traverly audit liaison. Even the executive assistant, who usually replied to calendar requests within 30 seconds, didn't respond. Voicemail. 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 He tried to play it cool, pacing while fake chuckling to himself, pretending it was all just a misunderstanding. But it wasn't. Because somewhere across town, in my apartment with the windows cracked open and the afternoon light drifting through the blinds, I sat at my upright piano, playing Debussy with one hand and sipping cold tea with the other. My phone lit up on the coffee table. Incoming notification. Tipline confirmation your submission has been received. I didn't smile. I didn't need to, because this wasn't revenge. This wasn't catharsis. This was just truth doing its job. The audit team now had everything: time discrepancies, forged metrics, version logs. My document packet included not only the files, but a timeline annotated and cross-referenced against the firm's own policy documents. I even included an index, color-coded. You're welcome, Harper. They wouldn't trace it back to me, of course. The upload was anonymous, routed through their own secure portal. But someone in that office would know. Eventually, they'd feel it in the missing pieces, the accuracy, the methodical precision of someone who knew where the bodies were buried. Back at the firm, Ron was sweating through his shirt, blaming interns, barking at Harper to just send everything. We'll clean it up after. The CEO was calling his lawyer on a burner phone he kept for personal emergencies. Legal was trying to figure out if the resignation video could be scrubbed from internal chat archives before it made its way into Discovery. And Ray? Ray was very, very quiet. Somewhere in that office, he was reviewing metadata of his own, because he understood what was happening now. He'd seen it before. A slow, quiet breach, not a storm, a leak. one they didn't even realize was flooding the floor until the water was already up to their necks. The announcement hit at 9:07 a.m. sharp. No leaks, no warning, just a crisp press release posted to the Travelly Logistics investor portal and emailed to every executive on their partner distribution list. The subject line was surgical: Vendor Partnership Realignment Q4 Transition Notice. Inside, just 5 sentences. No fluff, no excuses. We have concluded our review of current strategic partnerships and, due to unresolved data integrity concerns, are formally terminating our relationship with Farson & Co., effective immediately. Transition to a new consulting partner will begin today, with no interruption in service expected. The new vendor has demonstrated exceptional familiarity with our systems, processes, and compliance priorities. That's where it should have ended. But the last sentence, oh, that last sentence, cut deeper than any subpoena ever could. We are confident in the leadership of Susan Hale, executive lead at Bramble and Royce Advisory, as she oversees this critical transition. Back at Farson, the email was read first by an assistant in procurement who accidentally refreshed the press release dashboard while looking for a lunch coupon. She blinked once, twice. Susan, downstairs, a junior exec named Carl, who once asked me if we really needed all those QA steps. Read the statement in the break room between bites of his protein bar. He dropped it mid-chew. Wait, Susan? By 9:12, the email had been forwarded 47 times internally. By 9:20, someone in HR had printed it out and left it on Ron's desk. By 9:28, the CEO stormed into the executive war room, face red, phone in hand, yelling, "Why wasn't I told?" Ray from legal didn't look up. "You were told. Just not in those words." Ron tried to deflect. "This is retaliation. She sabotaged the account. This is personal." Ray finally looked up. "You filmed her resignation like it was a TikTok challenge and joked about padding invoices in Slack threads you thought were private." Ron's mouth opened, then closed. Meanwhile, on my side of town, I sat in a high-backed chair in a quiet conference room with white walls, polished concrete floors, and a steaming cup of tea I hadn't touched yet. Meredith smiled across the table. "Welcome back." I nodded once. Simple, not smug. I didn't need to gloat. Everyone else was doing that for me. The Bramble and Royce team had already set up our transition plan, cleanly, efficiently, like people who knew exactly what mess they were stepping into, because they did know. I had briefed them with every file, every timestamp, every procedural gap Farson left behind. Internal audit team at Travelly, already in sync. The lawyers, quietly delighted by how pre-sorted the documentation was. Ron would blame the market. The CEO would try to spin it as strategic recalibration. HR would scrub the resignation video and pretend it never happened. But none of it would matter, because the only name that mattered now was printed at the bottom of Travelly's announcement, right under executive lead. And it wasn't theirs. For the first time in years, my inbox was full, but not with TDOS, crisis escalations, or status reports. It was congratulations, some sincere, some terrified, some hilariously awkward. Didn't see that coming, lol. Legend move, coffee soon, wait, are we still friends? I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened the official Travelly transition file, scrolled to the signature page, typed in my name, Susan Hale, executive lead, the woman you underestimated, and the last person you'll ever laugh out of a boardroom. The boardroom at Farson & Co. had always felt like a stage: oversized leather chairs, backlit mission statement on the wall, enough chilled water bottles to hydrate a small militia. But that morning, it felt like a courtroom. Emergency session, closed doors, no catering. At the head of the table sat the CEO, flanked by the CFO, legal, and a very tired-looking woman from compliance who had already popped 3 antacids before the meeting began. Her name was Dana. No one usually listened to Dana. But today, the fate of the firm hung on every word she stammered out through clenched teeth. The investor calls had started at dawn. Not irate, worried, which was worse. Not 1 but 4 major clients had placed their accounts on review status. Funds frozen. Contracts pending reevaluation. Translation: they were inching out the door while legal scrambled to reframe the building as not on fire. Worse, someone had leaked screenshots to an industry compliance blog. Not from me, I had no need. But someone, somewhere inside, had seen the iceberg and decided to jump ship by throwing the captain under the bus. One screenshot showed a Slack thread from months ago. Ron, just rebrand the duplicate invoice set as Market Research South Region. No one checks the line items anyway. New VP, Elmau, if we get audited, I'm blaming you. Ron, lol, just bury it. Add Susan's name on the version history, looks more legit. File upload attached, Travelly Q2 metrics fina L final real final thison XLSX beneath that, another file. Titled, HR LOL MOV, that was the resignation video. Ron had saved it, named it, labeled it like a party favor from the world's dumbest going-away party. The compliance officer played both files on mute in front of the board. No one spoke. Not when they watched the clip of me, expression calm, voice steady, handing over my resignation while Ron snorted like a frat boy filming a prank. Not when they scrolled through his follow-up messages, timestamped just minutes after I left. Classic. Bet she cries on LinkedIn by Friday. No one cried. Clients were pulling back, and one of the largest institutional investors had quietly removed the firm from their stable partner list, citing ongoing cultural and procedural concerns. The CFO asked for a break. Ray from legal didn't. He leaned forward, pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, and said flatly, "I advised you months ago to audit version control protocols. This," he gestured at the screen, "is what happens when you prioritize optics over infrastructure." Ron finally snapped. "We didn't know she was going to nuke the entire damn company." Ray tilted his head. "She didn't, you did." Down the hall, junior staff began discreetly pulling resumes from drawers, whispering in break rooms, texting recruiters. You could feel it, not panic, collapse, not with explosions, but with slow, inevitable cracking, like the foundation of a building shifting while everyone inside keeps typing emails, pretending the lights aren't flickering. Back in the glass box, the board chair folded her hands. "Is there anything salvageable?" Ray didn't answer. Dana tried. "We can cooperate fully with Traverly's investigation and potentially renegotiate under new leadership." The room turned to the CEO. His face was gray. New leadership. That was corporate speak for, "Your seat just caught fire." Meanwhile, across town, I was finishing my onboarding documents. Bramble and Royce had already routed the Traverly files to my dashboard. My name was listed on every slide, every login, every task flow. I was in, not as an employee, as the solution. When I glanced at the headlines later that day, I saw the blog post, the clip, the Slack leaks, the HR LOL file that would be the death rattle of their PR team for weeks. I didn't share it, didn't comment, didn't post a vague quote about karma. I just closed the tab, sipped my tea, and let the weight of it all slide off me like a coat I no longer had to wear. They gave me a demotion. I gave them a consequence. And I never raised my voice. The conference room smelled like eucalyptus and leather and power, not desperation masked in synthetic air freshener like the one I used to sit in at Farson. This table didn't have scratch marks from interns nervously dragging their laptops across it. No coffee rings. No laminated Q2 spirit values reminders. Just clean wood, clean light, and a dozen pairs of eyes looking straight at me, not through me. Across from me sat Meredith Singh, calm as ever, flanked by the Traverly CFO, legal counsel, and a man from the board who used to call me the one who always fixed things last minute. Now, addressed me as Miss Hale, not Susan, not "Hey, can you just Miss Hale?" The CFO folded his hands. "On behalf of the executive team, I want to thank you for your discretion, your clarity, and your integrity throughout this process." Meredith smiled. "You didn't just rescue our data, you clarified our future." They slid the contract across the table. Bramble and Royce's final agreement. My role explicitly outlined. Executive lead, enterprise reform. No asterisks. No asterisk footnote about interim or pending approval. I read it once just for ritual. I'd already seen every clause, every timeline. I'd help write them. I signed. The pen didn't shake. Outside that room, Farson was still spinning. Their LinkedIn page had gone quiet. Their comms team had posted a tone-deaf quote about resilience in changing times, and it had been radioed into oblivion by industry veterans and bitter former interns alike. What really tore the lid off? The video. It surfaced first on a mid-tier compliance watchdog blog. Then Reddit got a hold of it, and then it went viral in all the wrong Slack channels. Clip title, "How to Lose a $40M Client in 3 Minutes." It started with me, standing still in that boardroom with the balloons sagging behind me like defeated intentions. Then Ron's voice, "Smile for the committee." Then the camera shake as I slid my resignation across the table. Then his cackle, then silence. People ate it up like popcorn. Industry heads, HR whisperers, burnt-out consultants, they all chimed in. One tweet read, "Legend move, silent resignation, strategic carnage, we stand." Another, she printed her own letter. They printed their own death warrant. Back in the corner office that used to be mine in everything but title, Ron watched it on loop. He found it through a tag in a message thread titled, "Remember Susan." The thumbnail was his own smug face mid-laugh. He clicked it. The autoplay started, and for the first time in his career, the joke didn't land. No one asked him for a reaction. No one wanted a comment. He was no longer the center of the story. He was the punchline. Across the city, I opened my laptop. Notification banners fluttered across the screen, news alerts, DMs, quiet congratulations from people who used to ignore me in elevators. I let them pass. Instead, I opened the onboarding portal for our first cross-functional planning meeting. Drafted my outline for Phase 1, System Architecture Realignment, Budget Integrity Audit, Staff Retraining, because this wasn't just a new title. This was a new mandate. I wasn't patching up someone else's mess anymore. I was building the blueprint. My name sat clean on the digital banner. Susan Hale, Executive Lead, Enterprise Reform. No fanfare, no applause. Just the right woman, finally sitting in the right room, with her hands on the real levers. Not revenge, just receipts. They gifted me a demotion. I gifted them the consequence. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.